I went through IVF at Kindbody. After hearing Bloomberg's IVF Disrupted, I realized that my story was part of something much bigger than I knew at the time. If you're new here, hi, I'm Meredith. I'm a single mother by choice. I decided to have a child with my gay best friend, and I am co-parenting that child with my mom. We live in a multi-generational home in Orange County, California. I never thought I would do IVF. It was kind of off the table for me. I thought that if a kid was going to come, it was going to come. It was going to come naturally. Wasn't in a relationship, so it wasn't going to come naturally. So Michael and I, he's my gay best friend, tried some turkey baster methods, so to speak, and didn't work. And after doing some fertility testing at Kindbody, which we'll get into a little bit later, I just decided to go that IVF route. It is so wild to say that I'm on the other side of it. My son is almost 6 months old at this point. Ow, ow. Yeah, ow, ow, ow. Hey. I don't feel vastly different than when I started. I just thought IVF was going to change who I was as a person, but I feel pretty good. If you're interested in following my story, this YouTube channel is all about how we're living our lives and how, I am co-parenting with my mom, how Michael is helping co-parent as well. He's not out of the picture. He comes to visit Oscar like every other month and is FaceTiming every other day. We're planning some little adventures. I recently lost my job and I'm looking into new realms and adventures. Sounds like I'm off to be a knight. But unicorns may be involved, fingers crossed. But yeah, that's what this YouTube channel is all about. So subscribe below if you're interested. I had so few touch points when I was going through the process, and so I'm happy to be here. There's a link below that will help you schedule some time with me to chat. So let's get back to Kindbody. They were launched in 2018. Their vision was to make IVF more approachable, less clinical, and more compassionate, which was what drew me towards the process. I was looking for how to go through this with someone who could help explain it to me. I come from a traditional household, mom, dad, who conceived me the natural way. And I had some friends who went through IVF, but they had gone through what felt like something that was very clinical to me. Kindbody was all about, again, that accessibility. And I hate to say that the vibe is kind of their biggest draw, but truly it is. Like, everything is just very millennial. Light woods, it's like pop of color. You go in, they have pictures of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the wall and all these cute little books stacked up around you. And it just feels like you're in your like chicest best friend's living room. It expanded pretty fast across the country and was backed by a lot of big investors. Apparently, Bloomberg's been following a bunch of different IVF storylines. I hadn't seen any of them until after I totally completed my process with Kindbody. And this series, which built on an article that had been written, was released a few weeks ago. And the series dives into what happens when startup mentality meets a healthcare business. I recently took a road trip up the coast for a friend's wedding, and my mom and I listened to the series in its entirety. And I started connecting the dots between what I was hearing in the series to my actual lived experience. And I figure that this is a great platform for me to talk about my experience with Kindbody. Spoiler alert, it's not all bad. And really share what I went through if you're considering using their services. If you live in a major metropolitan city, you may have seen like a Kindbody RV trailer that will do testing. And we're going to start there in one of those trailers because that's where I spent the beginning of my experience with Kindbody, and it lasted a lot longer than I anticipated. I moved to Orange County in 2021. It was right after my dad passed away. I had been living up in Los Angeles for about a decade, a little bit more than a decade, working in the entertainment industry. And when my dad passed away, my mom moved in with me, and I found this house in Anaheim. It's a mid-century modern delight. Everything that mattered in it was original. Everything that I would want to redo had already been toyed with. So my mom and I bought it. It's by a famous architect, and I've just been so happy to live in Anaheim. So when I saw that Kindbody had a clinic in Newport Beach, which was much closer than the one in Santa Monica or the one that I had seen in Century City, I was just thrilled. They didn't have an office. It was a trailer. It was one of those trailers, and it was parked outside of what would be the office. So as you pulled up to the parking lot, you were just like passing construction workers who were going in and finishing up the office. the team at Newport Beach told me that office was going to open, and the deadline just kept getting pushed out. Not their fault. It was definitely the fault of Kindbody, but I didn't think that much of it then. At first, the trailer was fun and kitschy. You know, as you're heading back into the one little exam room they have, everything's kind of bumping and swaying. The inside of it was decorated just like one of the offices, so it felt at home and cozy. And the team there was chef's kiss, fantastic. It was a tiny spot. I mean, you're sitting like shoulder to shoulder with other people going through treatment as well. Everybody's there in the morning to get their blood tested and stuff. And I mean, I found the silver lining. I liked getting to know the other people. I love sharing my story. Obviously, I have a YouTube channel. So talking to people about what they were going through, it just felt like there was a nice camaraderie. I can sense that for some people, however, fertility treatments are a very personal thing. It may be confidential, and you wouldn't necessarily want to be sitting in such close quarters with someone. There was also the added excitement of having to use a porta potty to collect samples and stuff. It was a dedicated porta potty, and it was a clean porta potty, but a porta potty nonetheless. And it was right next to the porta potty that the construction workers were using. And yeah, it was just gritty. I joke that Oscar is my RV baby. Like, I didn't go through all of those bumpy transvaginal ultrasounds for nothing. Thank you very much. But I realized that we were in that RV so much longer because of these financial delays that they talked about on the Bloomberg series. I don't know how I would have felt about continuing my experience with Kindbody if I had known about all those financial delays at the time. Once I did finally get into a clinic, which I had to go up to Santa Monica to get my eggs retrieved because they didn't have those capabilities in the Newport RV, I started to notice the difference between the different clinics. I'm sorry, Santa Monica, but the OC team is just like kinder and sweeter. And I don't know if it's because they were new and it was the shine of something exciting. The Santa Monica team felt just a little bit colder and more clinical, especially at the higher levels. Now, the Bloomberg series did kind of go over how folks who were in the more technical roles of, you know, embryologist and doctor kind of saw the holes in the practice. And the nurses were, I don't know, the nurses were great in Santa Monica, but everybody else just kind of felt like they were doing their job. Now, they also might have absorbed a lot of the traffic and the patients that came from the Century City office, which closed. I was surprised to see that had closed. I thought at the time, oh, it probably doesn't make sense to have Century City and a Santa Monica office. They're so close together. But now, after listening to the series, I'm like, oh, it was probably those financial issues that they were going through. The Santa Monica office also just felt well-tread. That's the best way I can put it. It just didn't feel as... It's not that it wasn't clean. It's just that it was likely seeing a lot of people coming in. So like there was a big stain on the tiles in the bathroom floor, not dirty, but like some kind of solvent had maybe spilled. And it was like these like really pretty tiles that just weren't pretty in this one spot. And the sink was affixed to the wall, but I could tell that it hadn't been properly fixed. And like the caulking was coming off. And I was like, that's kind of, I mean, I could fix that. Do they need me to fix that? It's just little things like that. The recovery room that you would sit in after an egg retrieval, they're very small. They're like closets. And I remember like one or two of them not being used for recovery, but as closets instead. So, you know, it's just when you're in a building and rooms are being used for different things. It's one thing if it's just like an office that people don't see, but if it's something like this where people are paying a lot of money to have eggs retrieved or IVF implantations and stuff, you want to see the rooms being used for what they were made for. Does that make sense? I mean, it was clean and sterile. I didn't have any questions about that. At the heart of the experience, though, obviously, were the medical decisions. And this is kind of where what I listened to the podcast and what my mom heard with the podcast kind of differed a little bit and left her with some concerns. In Bloomberg's podcast, they talked to a couple different women who felt like they were pushed into unnecessary testing and felt like they were pushed unnecessarily towards IVF. And I don't think that was the experience I had. I know that's not the experience I had. So let me go over kind of what I went through. And if you're interested in listening to how I got here, there is a playlist linked below that I was going week by week through my experience of everything I was hitting. So feel free to listen to that. I went to Kindbody for testing. My intent was to figure out what was going on with my body at 38 years old. What was the likelihood of me getting pregnant? Could I get pregnant? Could I not get pregnant? I just kind of wanted to know baseline where I was at. I was hoping to go the IUI route. I was hoping that they could just kind of take this turkey baster approach that Michael and I were trying and do that clinically and help me out. One of the tests that I had was something called a saline bubble study. And I'm a theater major, so don't ask me questions here. My basic understanding of it was that they shoot sort of like effervescence into your hoo-ha and determine whether or not your fallopian tubes are open. I was told it wasn't an uncomfortable procedure, that it would be pretty easy to get through. I found it to be rather uncomfortable, and I have a pretty high threshold for pain. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and I've mostly blocked it out at this point. It was conducted in the back of the RV, so it was a little bumpy. It was very close quarters, and the results of that test were inconclusive. When we came out of it, I sat and I talked with my doctor, who I adore. Dr. Sundheimer is absolutely fantastic, and I couldn't recommend her enough. She told me that the next round of testing would be something called an HSG. The HSG test, again, theater major, don't ask me how this works, but my general understanding is that they shoot some dye up into your hoo-ha again. And I guess it's kind of sort of like an MRI situation or an ultrasound where with the dye, they're able to see how everything is operating down below. I was told that the HSG test is uncomfortable. And so after being told that the saline bubble study was really nothing, but that the HSG was something, and I felt something from this one, I was nervous about what this was going to feel like. And I just remember sitting in that RV and talking to Dr. Sundheimer, and she was like, do you want to go forward with that next? Or, I'll leave you to think about that. And I told her, I just want a baby in my arms. And it's funny because in the podcast, the reporter talked about how all of the mothers that she interviewed had a moment, like a point where they decided to continue and go down this IVF route. And that was it for me. The doctor said to me, well, there is always IVF. And a light switch just flipped. And it went from being something that was totally a no-go for me, something I didn't want to do, to something that was a possibility. And I didn't want to do the HSG test and go through more pain to find out that possibly, my fallopian tubes weren't open and IUI wasn't going to work and I was going to have to go through IVF. Like that would be the next step. And on the drive home, my mom said that there was definitely something in me that had changed. And literally it was just like the decision was made that day. I didn't have to sit on it. I just decided I wanted to go for it. And IVF went from being something that I had considered playing God to, no, it's just another way to have a baby. When you go into IVF, it's not like, oh, you're definitely going to have a baby at the end of this. There's so many steps along the way. And I went through all of them with Kindbody to possibly, hopefully, maybe have a little miracle. It's just a miracle that's aided by science rather than biology. Like I said, there are a lot of steps in the procedure. I went into that first egg retrieval a couple weeks later, and we didn't get the results that I had hoped for. I yielded only 2 embryos at the end of it, and one of them was mosaic and one of them was aneuploid. Aneuploid means it's out of the race. It's not going to work. Mosaic means it could work maybe. We're not really sure. I talked with my mom after that about what she thought our next steps should be, because she was financially assisting me with this. And she said, let's just go ahead and do another egg retrieval. And I got the call from my doctor while I was at a conference in Las Vegas. And I remember sitting in the Mandalay Bay shops, like talking to her on a bench outside of the Guinness store. I don't know if I took a picture of it, but I just remember staring at the flying toucan, like going over all of this in my head. And I said to her, like, if we want to do another egg retrieval immediately, what's the timeline for that? And she was like, well, I could see you tomorrow in the office to do your blood test to see if we're ready to go forward. And so I rearranged my flight, flew back to John Wayne Airport, which is right next to the Newport clinic, which we'll get into in a second. And I did that. So I did that, and the second egg retrieval yielded 2 very healthy embryos, one of which is sitting on my mom's lap in the other room right now. So contrary to what I heard in the podcast narrative, I didn't feel pushed into any of these decisions. They felt like my decisions. My mom, from the outside looking in, and after having listened to this podcast, she felt like we were pushed towards IVF. And I just didn't feel that way, because it was something I was so staunchly opposed to. For me to have that come to Jesus moment so quickly, it was all me. It was all me. And I felt like Dr. Sundheimer genuinely cared about me. Like, in talking to her in the Mandalay Bay resort, she told me that she had reached out across her network of Kindbody doctors and said, here's my patient. She's 39. Here's how she responded to the previous medical protocol or drug protocol. Has anybody had similar results? And another doctor from Kindbody jumped in and said, here's what we did. I upped my Menopur dosage, and there was something else we did. And we ended up getting the same outcomes that this other doctor had. So I really appreciated that the Kindbody doctors talk, and there's a community there. And I think they're looking out for the best outcomes for their patients. You know, maybe business folk on the other end are trying to push for egg retrievals and trying to push for egg freezings and stuff like that. But Kindbody didn't reach out to me. I reached out to them. I needed their services, and they provided. Like I said, there's a business side to this as well. And the Bloomberg podcast went over that pretty in depth. I mentioned that the clinic in Orange County is right next to the John Wayne Airport. The Santa Monica clinic that I visited, there's a lot of heavy foot traffic. Santa Monica is not like a city, but it's a pretty bustling little burg, you know, quite a bit of traffic. It was really enlightening to hear from, there were embryologists that the journalists interviewed who said that their location isn't necessarily chosen maybe by the best teams, that there are, you know, real estate folks who came in and said, let's go ahead and put this here, put this there. And that when you're opening an embryology lab, that there are things you have to take into account, like pollution from cars, pollution from like roofing substances, pollution from nearby traffic, pollution from airports, and that you can get worse results in the lab when those factors are taken into account. If a lab's not properly ventilated or and such, if you're using space that was meant to be an entirely different business rather than a medical facility. So I've got to say that is something that concerns me. The eggs that were retrieved and the embryos that were developed in Santa Monica, did my first round not develop because of pollution from, I don't know, like nearby cars? It happened before the wildfires. The wildfires in California were just up the street from the Santa Monica location. How did that affect the embryos that are growing in that lab? Mine are frozen in there now. I think they're safe. But, you know, what about the embryos in the lab in Newport, like that people are creating right now? Do the airplanes nearby, does that affect it? Like, it's something that makes me think, and I'm not an expert at this, and I would defer to an expert on these things to alleviate my concerns and to say that, no, like it is properly ventilated, everything's fine, but it's something to consider. Additionally, while I was there have been some billing changes. I've gotten a couple different alerts of like, now we're going to use this, so put your credit card number in here. I feel like I've been billed for stuff that insurance is supposed to cover, so that's something I'm still ongoing. And none of it feels malicious. It just feels disorganized. The app has had a lot of problems. The dashboard getting into all of my medical records, like I had trouble on my phone, I think, using the Google sign-in. It just kind of kept reloading and refreshing. And, I chalked it up to, it's a new business, they're trying new things, and I welcome innovation, and I trust that it will get better. But after listening to the podcast, I have concerns. I still have 2 good embryos at Kindbody, so I think a lot about what happens next. I would love to hear sort of like a state of the union from the folks who are at Kindbody now. I know, thanks to this reporting, that there's been a lot of executive turnover. So as a patient, I think it would be helpful to get a, calming email from a CEO My doctor still works for the office in Newport Beach, but like, what happens if she leaves Kindbody? Can I transfer my embryos out to like wherever her next practice is? Is she still going to be with the company when I'm ready for my next transfer? I mean, the growth model of the company, because I'm a business nerd, I get excited about this kind of stuff. It made sense at the time. And when I was in it, there were just so many other factors to consider that I wasn't worried about this kind of stuff. But now that I have a moment to breathe, it makes me think. I mean, that said, though, a lot of the clinics that they talked about on the podcast were on the East Coast. And I just wonder if perhaps the East Coast clinics are just run a little bit differently than the West Coast clinics, because I didn't experience as much trouble as the folks on the East Coast did. Speed and scale can kind of undermine the trust that fertility requires. Like, I can't stress enough how much my team felt like family. I didn't realize how many doctor's appointments I was going to have with these same people. And it's so important to feel welcomed and loved and cared for. But things are changing in the fertility industry. I read this wild article that I'll link below about how robotics and AI are intervening. It was from the Washington Post, and it was about, they highlighted, I think, 2 different companies. Let me check my notes. Conceivable Life Sciences and Overture Life. So basically, they have AI trained models to like watch sperm and pick out the best and the fastest. And they move so quickly and they corkscrew a lot that it's hard for the human eye to follow them. But these computers process data so fast that the cameras can watch and see where they go. I want to read some passages from the article because it blew my mind. The goal is to take repetitive work, typically done by a highly paid embryologist overseen by an even more highly paid REI in an expensive lab, and compress it into only 15 minutes in a local doctor's office with virtually no effort required from the doctor. According to Overture's peer-reviewed studies, 98.3% of Divitri's eggs survive when thawed, compared to 96.4% of the standard process. And the eggs yield 12% more embryos ready for implantation, known as blastocysts. Like, those are big numbers. Those are big shifts. And I don't think that we should not still have embryologists and still have doctors. Like, I don't want to hand all this over to the robots, because who knows which sperm they're going to pick. They might pick the ones that are really docile and that'll listen to the AI and listen to robotics. And then you just have a swath of humanity ready to listen to the robots. I see where this could go. But I think that having this kind of technology that could lower the cost for people who can't afford IVF right now, I think it's really exciting. I think there's a lot of stuff coming into the marketplace. Again, though, it's more speed and it's more scale, and it involves human lives, and it involves you at your most vulnerable time. So I don't know. This has been a little bit rambly. It's been a little bit of a Kindbody review. I think bottom line, I'm going to keep using Kindbody. I love the team I worked with. I am going to keep my eyes open to headlines about them to make sure that I get ahead of things if stuff goes south. But ultimately, if you are looking for an IVF experience, I would maybe check out a couple different clinics and see where you're comfortable, because these people are going to be like your family. And if you go in and they're not kind to you and they don't treat you with respect, or you're seeing different people every time you go in, it's going to make the whole process feel clinical. And I thought my experience would be clinical, and it just wasn't. It was really lovely. And I plan on sending Christmas cards to my doctor and nurses and ultrasound techs like throughout the rest of my life, because what they did for me is, there are no words. You know, they were a part of my family making. Like, honestly, I kind of feel bad for couples that just get pregnant, because it's just the 2 of them. And I had a whole village that helped me. Like, it felt really special. It felt really wonderful. And so in the end, I think my advice is to just look at your options, look at your choices, go visit places, read reviews, and go with your gut. That's what you got to do. If you have any questions for me, comment below. Let me know if you went to Kindbody, if you enjoyed their services, or if you didn't. I would love to hear that as well. Everybody I know in California that dealt with Kindbody loved them. I had some friends that went and did egg retrievals and were really happy with their experience too. So there you have it. No conclusives here. We're not being binary about anything. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.